Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're going to be making some delicious Afghan food. So I feel like my love for making food and sharing recipes comes from my upbringing and the culture that I grew up in. Both of my parents are from Afghanistan, and even though I was raised in Canada, I learned a lot about the plight of the Afghan people while I was growing up. And these last few weeks, kind of seeing what's been going on in Afghanistan, it's been weighing really heavy on me. And I've been feeling like I want to do something, but I don't really know what. But one thing I thought, this small thing that I thought that maybe I could do, is to connect you with the beauty of the Afghan culture and the Afghan people through food. Because I really believe that there's no better way to kind of connect people and to forget about our differences than through food. So I've been calling up my mom, my dad, and a whole bunch of our family members and just gathering their recipes, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. These recipes and these meals that I grew up with and that I love so much. We're also going to be donating all of the revenue from today's video, and I'll also be making my own personal contributions to 3 separate organizations. I'm going to leave their links for you in the description box in case you want to check it out and donate as well. But just by being here, you're already helping with that, so I really appreciate it. Now let's get started on making some delicious Afghan food. For this first recipe, we're going to be making Aushak, which is like an Afghan dumpling. It kind of even resembles ravioli, and I love this stuff. It's so good, but it's not something that we traditionally have like every day. It's normally something you actually only have at a special occasion, like a wedding, and I think it's because it's a lot of effort to make, but I'm going to share with you like a shortcut that's going to save you a load of time. For now though, we're going to get started with making the filling, the bit that goes inside of the Aushak. We're first going to very thinly slice the white and light green parts of 2 medium-sized washed leeks, which should make about 5 cups of chopped leeks in total. And then we're going to transfer this all to a strainer that's placed over top of a bowl, and we're going to drizzle over top a tablespoon of vegetable oil and 2 teaspoons of salt. Then with our hands, we're going to mix this to make sure the pieces are well coated. So the salt is a really important ingredient here. It helps to draw the water out of the leeks, and it helps to soften it. It breaks down the cell walls, which is exactly what we want. So now that we've mixed it through, we're gonna let this sit for an extra 5 minutes to soften even more. After the 5 minutes, we're gonna squeeze the mixture to extract any excess liquid that it's holding on to. And now we can add to it 2 cups of very thinly sliced green onion, or you could use chives if you prefer, a teaspoon of chili powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. We're then going to give this all a mix, and we're going to set it aside for now. Next, we're going to make sirmas, which is a garlic yogurt sauce. We're just going to add 2 cups of an unsweetened plant-based yogurt to a bowl, along with 2 cloves of crushed garlic, 1.5 teaspoons of optional dried mint, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Then we're going to give this a stir, and we're going to set it aside. Next, we're going to make the tomato sauce, which is called qayma, and this is what goes on top of the Aushak. So to a large pan on medium-high heat, we're gonna add 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. And when it's hot, we're gonna add to it 1 chopped yellow onion. We're gonna cook this for about 5 minutes or until the onion is golden. And then we're gonna add to it 1 chopped green chili pepper, 2 optional minced cloves of garlic, 2 teaspoons of paprika powder, 2 teaspoons of ground coriander, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of ground black pepper. We're then going to cook this for a minute, stirring throughout just to toast the spices. And then we're also going to add in 1/4 cup of tomato paste, 200 grams of a vegan ground beef, and 1 cup of water. We're then going to stir and cook this for 4 to 5 minutes before covering it and then removing it from the heat. So traditionally, this qayma topping uses ground beef, but here at Pickup Limes, everything we use is plant-based, of course. So most grocery stores carry this vegan mock ground beef. It's usually made from soy, so that's what we've used here today. And the other thing that we're gonna be changing up from the usual is that traditionally the dough is homemade, but it is so much work. So what my mom recommended is that we just go to our local Asian supermarket, and in the freezer section, they have wonton wrappers, and these look and taste the exact same as when you make it yourself at home. So that's our hack, and that's what we're gonna be using today. So we're going to take about 1 tablespoon of the leek filling, and we're going to place it in the center of our wrappers. We're then going to use a little bit of water and wet 1/2 of the wrapper, and then we're going to pick it up, fold it in half, and as we firmly pinch the edges to seal it, we want to shuffle our fingers across the Aushak to press out any air bubbles. And once it's well sealed, we're going to transfer it to a plate, and then we're going to continue this process until all of our filling is used up.
من برای نامگم که من دو خودم درست نمیکنم. I'm just going to use wonton wrappers.
حتی هم دخترها کاکامه که استادن دو آشک روی منتین خودم درست نمیکنن، فقط بولانی میکنن. او خیلی کار داره.
خیلی کار داره نه؟
خیلی چیزا وقتی درست میکنن فشاری نشته که 10 تا زن دور هم میشینن
اختلاط میکنن
خنده میکنن به چای هم دیگر خفه میکنن اینا آشک و بلانیتی هم میکنن که به 10 دقیقه بشینن بخورن.
Then we're going to bring a large pot of water to a boil over high heat. We're going to add a tablespoon or 2 of an unflavored oil to it, and then we can gently drop in the Aushak one at a time. We don't want them piling on top of each other, so when there's a single layer in our pot, we're going to stop and let these cook for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then we can scoop them out and place them in a lightly greased colander just to ensure any excess liquid continues to drip off while we repeat the process with the remaining Aushak.
One by one. Okay.
Now it's already time to serve this one up. So we're first going to layer some of our garlic yogurt sauce on the base of a large shallow dish. We're then going to place 1 to 2 layers of the cooked Aushak on top of that, and then we're going to drizzle on some more yogurt sauce. And finally, we're gonna add the qeymeh, or that meaty tomato sauce, over top of it all. You can also garnish this with some fresh cilantro leaves, or we've used some sliced mint leaves, and now you're ready to serve it. If you're a fan of dumplings of any kind, and if you haven't tried Afghani Aushak or mentu, which is another dumpling-like dish, then you have to give this recipe a try, especially now that you know how to do it. It's actually quite simple, and for as long as I can remember, this has been one of my favorite dishes. So for this next recipe, we're going to be making Bolani, which is a stuffed flatbread. And usually with Afghan meals, there isn't like a main dish. It's a whole bunch of little things that together make up the main meal. And Bolani is sometimes one of them. Sometimes we'd also have Bolani as just like a snack together with Chutney. Now we're going to make this the traditional way by making our own dough. If you would rather not make your own dough, I'll let you know what you can use instead. That's going to save you a whole bunch of time, but I prefer it when the dough is homemade. To a large shallow bowl, we're gonna add 1 cup of warm water along with 1.5 tablespoons of an unflavored vegetable oil, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, half of a teaspoon of quick rising yeast, and then we're just gonna give this a stir before we add in 3 cups plus 1 tablespoon of bread flour. We're then gonna give this a mix, and then you can get in there with your hands and just knead this for about 3 minutes. If the dough is too sticky, we can add small amounts of flour and then just continue to knead.
من بولانی از همین آرد معمولی که نان درست میکنن برید فلاور درست میکنم. حالا شماها تجربه خودی که دارین از هر آردی که خوش دارین دوست دارین.
That's all-purpose flour هم میشه.
دیگه.
So we've used bread flour for this, and it is preferred over all-purpose flour because it has more protein, and that's gonna give us a dough that's a lot more stable, and it's gonna kind of keep its shape a little bit better when we roll it out later. So now that we're done kneading it, we can actually just cover it with a damp kitchen cloth, and then we're gonna let this rest at room temperature for about 30 minutes or so while we prepare the filling. For the filling, we're just gonna cook 2 peeled and chopped large potatoes in boiling water until it's fully cooked through. And while that's cooking, to a large bowl, we're gonna add a cup's worth of chopped green onion, or you could use some fresh chives. We're also gonna add a cup of fresh cilantro that we first chopped up, and 1 chopped green chili pepper is gonna go in there as well, along with a teaspoon of ground coriander, a teaspoon of salt, and half of a teaspoon of ground turmeric, along with half of a teaspoon of ground black pepper. Once the potatoes are also cooked and drained, we're gonna add this to the bowl as well, and then using a fork, we're gonna mash this all together until it's mostly smooth, but if there's a few chunks in there, that's okay. Now returning to the dough, once it's done resting, we're gonna transfer it to a floured surface, and then with a knife, we're just gonna cut it into 8 even pieces. We're then gonna grab each piece, roll it with our hands. You can lightly coat it in some flour. And then what I like to do is just gently pull the dough to create a circular shape, first with my hands, and then I place it on the floured surface and roll it out until it's quite thin, a round circle that's about 20 to 22 centimeters in diameter. But the thinner you can roll this, the better. Of course, you just don't want it too thin that it's going to break. Now before adding the filling, just one tip is that I like to lift it up and then heavily flour the surface that I'm working on so that it doesn't later stick before I place the sheet back down. And now we can add about 1/3 cup of our potato filling to 1/2. We're gonna press it down with a fork, leaving about 1 centimeter of room around the rim. And then just like we did with the Aushak, we're gonna dip our fingers into some water and wet 1/2 of the dough. We're then gonna fold the bolani in half. We're firmly gonna press down on the folded part first as we work our way towards the rim. We're just trying to press out any air bubbles before we seal the edges completely. So this is how you make bolani traditionally if you decide to make your own homemade dough, but if you really couldn't be bothered with the whole process, a little hack that my mom utilized while we were growing up just to save some time is she would just buy some store-bought tortillas and you can fill it up in the same way, so you'll fill half of it, you can give it a flip and fold it. No need to seal the edges though this time, and then that's it, super simple. Now to a large skillet on medium-high heat, we're gonna add just a little bit of vegetable oil, and when the oil is hot, we're gonna add our bolani to it. I like to brush a little bit more oil on the top so that when the bottom is golden, we can immediately flip it and let it cook on the other side. Now bolani is traditionally served with chutney, and I want to show you how to make my mom's homemade chutney. I grew up having this. So to a food processor, we're just gonna add 3 packed cups of fresh parsley and 3 cups of packed fresh cilantro. With the stems included, it's no problem. We're also gonna add 5 cloves of garlic, half of a cup of raw walnuts, 3 green chili peppers with the seeds removed, a teaspoon of salt, and then 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. Then we're gonna blitz this up in the food processor until it's finely minced, but we don't want it pureed.
اما بازم نشکر که فلفل و سیر do what you like. بعضی تندتر میخورن، بعضی کمتر میخورن.
And then we're gonna add in a cup of white vinegar. We'll give it a mix again before we transfer it to some jars. This can be enjoyed right away, but usually it's best if you place it in the fridge overnight for the flavors to fully meld.
همون دم که درست میکنه ما میتونیم already بخوریم. بیتره اگه صبر کنیم.
already از اون دمی که درست میکنیم تا سال دیگه میتونی بخوری. اما بعضی نگار میدارن سال دیگه وا میکنن.
شوخی میکنن.
Yeah.
When the bolani has all been cooked and whenever you're ready, we can then cut them into little triangles, and now you're ready to enjoy it alongside your chutney. Traditionally, you even want the dough of the bolani to be so thin that you can see right through it into the filling that's in the inside, but it can be hard to roll the dough that thin, especially on your first few attempts. So if it's a little bit thicker, don't worry about it. The taste is delicious all the same. So for this next recipe, we're gonna be making Banjan, which is a delicious eggplant side dish. We actually made 2 versions of this for you, and they're both up on the blog. One version is the one that my mom made. It's like a modified version that uses way less oil. And the other version that we're gonna be making together right now, this is the traditional way of making Banjan. We're gonna start first with 5 tomatoes. 3 of the tomatoes we are going to chop up, and then 2 of the tomatoes we're going to slice into 1 centimeter thick rounds. We're then gonna peel 1 medium yellow onion, and we're gonna slice this into thin rounds as well. And then we're going to slice 2 green chili peppers in half lengthwise. We're then gonna peel 4 small eggplants, and we're gonna cut them in half before we then cut them into 1 centimeter thick planks. Now to a large pan on high heat, we're gonna add 1 1/4 cup of an unflavored vegetable oil, and when the oil is hot, we're very carefully gonna add 1 eggplant slice to the oil at a time until there's just an even single layer in the pan. We're gonna let this cook for about 2 to 3 minutes or until the bottom side is golden, and then we can give it a flip and cook it on the other side for an extra couple of minutes. This is more oil than we've ever used in any recipe here at Pickup Limes. I just want you to try the traditional way at least one time because it's really, really good. And again, if you want a version that uses like way less oil, the version my mom made for us when we were growing up, because she didn't want us having this much oil, I think uses only 2 tablespoons in comparison to this. So if you want that recipe, the full breakdown for it is in the link in the description box below. When both sides are nice and golden, we can scoop the pieces out and transfer them to a strainer that's sitting over top of a bowl to let any excess oil drip off. And then we're gonna repeat this process with the remaining eggplant. So now that we're done frying our eggplants, there should still be a little bit of oil left in the pan. We're gonna need about 1/4 cups total for what we're gonna be using next. If you have any more than that, you can just scoop it out. Just be careful because the oil is gonna be super hot. And if you have any less than that, you can always just top it up. Just be sure to drop the heat down to medium before you move on to the next step. To this oil, we're very carefully gonna add our 4 cloves of crushed garlic. We're gonna let this cook for a minute to become lightly golden, and then we're gonna add to the pan the sliced chili peppers, the chopped tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, a teaspoon of salt, and half of a teaspoon of ground turmeric. We're then gonna stir and cook this for an extra minute or 2. Now we're gonna reduce the heat to medium-low. We're first gonna layer in the pan our sliced onion. On top of that, we're gonna place half of our fried eggplant. On top of that is gonna go the sliced tomatoes, and then we're gonna finally add the last half of the eggplant over top of the tomatoes. We're now gonna cover the pan and cook this for about 20 minutes or until the onions have softened. So while this cooks away, we actually don't want to stir it because we don't want the onions or the tomatoes to disintegrate. So if you've got the lid on it and you've already turned the heat down to low, you're good to walk away. Now we're gonna move on to making the garlic yogurt sauce. This is really quite similar to how we did it before. So to a bowl, we're just gonna add a cup of an unsweetened plant-based yogurt, 2 cloves of crushed garlic, and half of a teaspoon of salt. I also like to serve this dish with some salata, which is an ultra simple Afghan salad with just some tomato and some cucumber, some very finely chopped onion, some lime or lemon juice, either is fine, along with some salt and some optional dried mint. And when you've mixed it together, it's ready to serve. The salad is so simple and so delicious. Now, when you're ready to serve the Banjan, what we're first going to do is spread some yogurt sauce onto the base of our large dish. We can then transfer out some layers of the eggplant, tomato, and onion to the platter, and then the reserved peppers can be placed on top of the dish, kind of just decoratively. And then comes the best part, which is scooping out the remaining sauce that's inside the pan. We're gonna drizzle this over top of the veggies. It's gonna give it a beautiful glisten. We're then gonna pour a generous amount of our garlic yogurt sauce over top of it all. And then I like to top it with some dried mint and some paprika powder for a pop of color. And now it's ready to enjoy with some of your yogurt sauce also served on the side.
بادنجان با برنج معمولا نمیخورن. البته به مهمونی‌های بزرگ ولی به خونه معمولا نون خورشه.
اما نفران نون افغانی نداشته باشن چی میتونن استفاده کنن؟ پیتا هم خوبه؟
من حالی من با نون پیتا میخورم.
Which one's your favorite of all of them?
This one.
The Bolani?
Yeah.
I think the Aushak, so we each have a favorite and it's different. If you'd like even more Afghan recipes, we actually couldn't squeeze them all into this one video. We've made a shole recipe too, which is one of my favorites. It's a savory, sticky rice dish, kind of like risotto, I guess. And there's a few other recipes too, so I'm gonna link those for you in the description box. And I also had a chat with my mom to see if there's anything she wanted to share.
چیزی دیگه هست که مهم باشه که من بگم یا راجع به افغانستان یا راجع به این رقم که حالا هست یا
خب اگه بگی که خیلی مقبوله. بگو متاسفانه که البته 2 هفته دیگه خیلی ها همین میگن که همه فراموش میکنن اما او آدم ها هنوز اون چه هستن، اون مشکلات هنوز اون چه هست، احتیاج به پول هنوز مردم دارن.
از مردم میخوایم که صبر و حوصله داشته باشن و دعا کنن که به خیر و صلاح مردم تمام بشه و یک آرامشی بیاید.
And so what we've chosen to do then is to share all of the revenue from today's video to 3 separate organizations, which is the International Committee of the Red Cross, the International Rescue Committee, and Women for Women. So if you'd like to check out these organizations yourself, or if you'd like any additional resources, we've compiled a little list. Those are in the description box below. And I just wanted to again say thank you for being here. Now you get to connect with the Afghan people and the Afghan culture. Who knows? In a few years, you might come across somebody who's had to immigrate to your country like my parents did, and I know it was really hard for them. And how cool if you can walk up to them and be like, I've made Aushak, I've made Bolani. You will make their day. And considering how difficult it can be when you're having to start your life all over from the ground up, if there's a smiling face who knows something about your food, I don't know anything that's kind of more beautiful than that. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it so much. Pick Up Lime signing off. We'll see you in the next video.
That was awesome. Yeah, thank you. Really good, man.